Welcome to Summers at the Library, where we are discussing books and everything that has to do with books. Some of my fondest memories growing up were the days during the summer when my mom would have to go to work and she would drop me off at the library, where I would spend all day and felt like I was in paradise. So here we are. All right. So today we are going to be discussing Samantha Irby's book, Wow, No Thank You. It's a book of essays that was published in 2020. Okay, so here's the synopsis from the publisher. All right. Irby is 40 and increasingly uncomfortable in her own skin, despite what inspirational Instagram infographics have promised her. She has left her job as a receptionist at a veterinary clinic, has published successful books, and has been friend zoned by Hollywood. She left Chicago and moved into a house with a garden that requires repairs and know how with her wife in a blue town in the middle of a red state where she now hosts book clubs and makes mason jar salads. This is the bougie life of a Hallmark Channel dream. She goes on bad dates with new friends, spends weeks in Los Angeles taking meetings with TV executives slash amateur astrologers while being a cheese fry eating, slightly damp Midwest person with neck pain and no cartilage in her knees, who still hides past due bills under her pillow. That was a mouthful, and actually, I think how was that? Oh, I think that was two sentences. I thought it was just one sentence, but it's actually two, and it's a lot of information, and it's actually very similar to how Irby writes. It's you know big paragraphs, sentences, and thoughts that just go on and on and on. So, um, yeah, so that's the synopsis of the book. Irby's first book was Meaty, and that was published in 2013. And from what I can tell, Wow, No Thank You, which is a book of essays, is her fourth of five books. Again, this came out in 2020, and it looks like she's had another book come out since then. So, what do I know about this author? What do I know about Samantha Irby? I believe I'm pretty sure I read We're Never Meeting in Real Life, which was a couple of books ago. And I'm trying to remember what my thoughts were on it. I think it was it's an interesting ride reading Irby's books. Um and so I'll just go ahead and jump into some of my impressions. So as I said, this is a book of essays. And I will even say that some of the chapters are not even essays, they are chapters of thoughts. And we're talking about Irby's life and who is Samantha Irby. So let me tell you, based on this book, Wow, No Thank You, how would I describe her based on this book? Samantha has a lot of issues. Um, in mentally, physically, um, in life, she has a lot going on and seems to have always had a lot going on. And she talks about these things in these various essays in the most raunchy, humorous, all over the place way possible. So even though I'm saying she has all these issues, it's really not a cry for me, pity me type of read. It's definitely you're laughing about things that you can't even believe that you're laughing about. Physically, she deals with a lot of bowel issues, Crohn's disease. She has arthritis. She has depression. She's had to deal with just she talks a lot about diarrhea and what's coming out of her behind and cramps and extended periods, and there's just so much truly that she has dealt with, and she lays it all out there on the line in this book. Um, and it's but it's funny. She well, it's not funny. It's not funny what's happening to her, or but she has such a way of looking at these things, um, that it's just it's wild. It's a lot, and the way the book is written, it's a little bit chaotic, and I think that's intentional because there are whole chapters that are not essays. It's thoughts around whatever that topic may be. For example, there's a chapter called Hello 911, and she goes through just mentioning it might be a sentence, something that feels like a fake emergency, or something in her life that you could freak out about. And it goes on and on and on. For pages and pages and pages. And I think it's a tool that she is using to show you a little peek inside of the chaos of her mind. I don't think she actually expects you to read all of these different things, because um, I think there's a couple of chapters like this, and I've got my Kindle over here, or my tablet with the Kindle app. Um, there's a couple of chapters like that where you realize after page 2 or 3 that, oh, okay, we're just listing things. There's no beginning, middle, and end here. This is not a story. And I think she wants to just show you um, how she can essentially go on about these topics forever. And so I skimmed over some of that. Um, but I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad at it. I think it was intentional. So those are what resonates with me from this book. I'm going to go through some highlights in a minute, but Samantha and I are around the same age. We're in our early 40s, and so I got a lot of her references. And she's so funny. There are things that she'll bring up that are just so 90s things, or just things you had to grow up in the 80s, the 90s, and understand, not having a cell phone and different shows that we used to watch, and so on and so forth. Um, I can relate to just being in that age group where you are not the main generation anymore. And so that is something that I am currently dealing with. I am currently dealing with the fact that there's a whole nother generation behind me. She and I are both elder millennials, and um, we're not middle aged yet, but it's just it's still interesting trying to see, okay, where do we fit in the world now, because um, there's a whole 1 and 2 generations coming up behind us, and they're in the spotlight. We're not in the spotlight anymore. And how are we dealing with life over 40, our careers, love life, so on and so forth? So I can really relate to just some of her being tired, being over it, all those kinds of things. Um, One of my favorite chapters in the book is actually called Girls Gone Mild. And I can really relate. Granted, I'm still very social. I am not a homebody chick at all by any stretch of the word at this point in my life. I hope to be hanging and vibrant and enjoying myself well into my 80s and 90s. Okay, so um that is one thing that Samantha and I do not have in common. Samantha is a homebody. She wants to be home. But when she goes out, she gets it in. She gets it in. She has a good time. She definitely used to run the streets in her younger years, but she's married. She's in the suburbs, and there's cats and kids now, and she's very much embraced kind of that stay in house life. So no, we don't have that in common. But getting into some of these highlights. So again, my favorite chapter, Girls Gone Mild. I just want to read one of my highlights here. Now, when I go out, I have to start gearing up for that shit at least 3 days in advance. And if I'm actually going to go through with it, it has to include both an ironclad reservation and a reliable seating arrangement. Showing up at a restaurant and hoping for the best is a young person's game. I can attest to that. I agree. Even though still some days, I do find myself, or I'm hanging out with friends, and we do show up somewhere, but I'm thinking ahead. Is there enough room for us there? Will we be able to sit? What are the shoes that I have on? um I'm not totally interested in these standing room only type of situations the way that I used to when I was younger. And frankly, this is something I don't even remember ever thinking about when I was 22. Like, okay, when we get there, will we be able to sit down? So I love that. I love that. I love, and this is, she goes on and she tells a really great story about going out and deciding in her mind, okay, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna stay out, and I'm going balls to the wall. I'm really gonna get this in, and it's a really, really great story there. So I love that. She talks about how in this same chapter she says it's usually around this time in the afternoon that I start rethinking my later commitments, no matter what the fuck they are. There's a lot of profanity in this book, so if that's gonna bother you, this is not for you. There's profanity, there's toilet humor, there's diarrhea, there's sex, there's all of these things. She's raunchy, um, and vulgar. So not everybody's cup of tea, but fine with me. Um, she says an 8 o'clock movie on Tuesday night sounded plausible last Thursday, but now it's Tuesday afternoon. I just had a lot of soup delivered while squinting at the laptop in my office, and now I don't think I'm going to be able to make that movie, okay? Going out on Saturday night sounded great on Wednesday, but now Saturday is here, and I'm in my cozy clothes, and I've got Joni Mitchell's Court and Spark playing on this phone I've propped in a glass because I couldn't connect the Bluetooth. Da, da, da. Again, very relatable. I can relate to that as well. Um, which is why personally, and you'll learn some things about me along the way here. Personally, if I don't have to RSVP uh ahead of time and agree to something ahead of time, I try to wait pretty much until the day of to see how I feel. If I can. Of course, there are things that you have to buy your ticket if you're going to a concert or whatever, whatever. But if it's something we have some flexibility on, I really like to take advantage of that. If I don't have to put it in stone, let's wait and see. I'm very much a let's play it by ear type of girl. If we can swing it, I look at it like this. There are enough things in life that we're obligated to. There's enough things I have to do. So when it comes to my leisure and fun and hanging out, I don't want those to be another thing on my to-do list. So as opposed to making it an obligation, whenever possible, let's try to see if we can see how we feel, Again, that's when we can. If people are coming from out of town or whatever, that's different. So you know what I mean. So I love that, and this is basically how she spends the book describing regular situations, her being antisocial, not wanting to go out, but then she gets out and, she doesn't want to stand up, so on and so forth. So let me scroll through here. What's another highlight that I wanted to share with you? So in the chapter called Detachment Parenting, she says, I have not lived the kind of life worth emulating. I didn't have the kind of childhood I can look back on and draw wisdom from. I had bad parents! Exclamation mark. Uh, both of her parents are deceased, she mentions in the book. And she grew up pretty poor. Um, and as she says here, she had bad parents. And it's the type of thing you don't hear people admit, and I'm sure it's easier to admit when your parents have passed away. That is something that she and I also have in common. I mean, not that my parents were bad. I had good parents, but they have both passed away. So um, she talks about her growing up and just how many of those things, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Some things that she had to learn along the way that she just was not taught by her parents, but again, that relatability is really Samantha's strong point. That that the relatability and the transparency and the honesty that she's willing to say these things. She's not trying to sugarcoat anything. She's not trying to by a long shot. She's not sugarcoating. Matter of fact, it's raw. It's very raw, and it's refreshing to hear people not try to give you fluff, not try to pretty up a situation or what they did or their behavior. She's very honest. And so um that's really one thing that I did, another thing that I really enjoyed about this book. But I read that passage because the detachment parenting, um her wife has children. I can't remember how many children there are, but she does go into what that's like because she does not have kids, and and neither do I. And she talks just about this idea: I have not lived the kind of life worth emulating, and that's so interesting. I think you can really unpack that. I think there's a lot there because I dare say most people have not. If it came down to, you know, this is the life that I've led, do what I did, the good, the bad, and the ugly. If all of our business was out there for children to see, you know, who among us could say that we've lived a life worth emulating? But yet people have kids every day. People have kids every day, and many probably, you know, it might be a good thing for them maybe to not. um, but I just think that's such a self-awareness. I love that. It's to really look at yourself and say, what I've done with myself, even though she's a published author and she's had success in her field. Um, and if you read her books, you'll see a lot of the stories and things that she's talking about. It's like, look, I am not somebody you want to follow behind how I've lived my life. So I just thought that was really interesting. One of the notes from that chapter on detachment parenting, um, that I'll share as well. She says, I'm not a parent. I had no desire to ever be a parent, and up until now, I never thought I would have little eyes watching everything I do, which is mostly nothing. I am self-conscious, and I hate for anyone to be watching me. And kids notice every fucking thing. I don't need these young, impressionable people out in the world quoting Mike Epps' stand up and saying bitch all the time, which are two things I very much enjoy doing, especially while talking on the phone to all my old bad bitches back home. She's so funny. Um, I can relate to this. I can relate to this whole passage where, um, like I said, I don't have any kids. I do have two godchildren. Um, I've dated people with kids, and it's very. I'm. I find that I think way more about what's coming out of my mouth and my actions than the parents do. Like when the children are around, I'm like, okay, everything is sanitized. I'm thinking about, teachable moments. I'm thinking about, okay, what am I wearing and what am I saying? And if I'm laying around, does that look like laziness or rest? How are they going to interpret what I'm saying? And what are we eating? Is there too much sugar in this? And oh, if I'm having a drink, how come, every time I'm over here, they see me drinking. Like, is that gonna have some impression on them? And the parents do not seem to be thinking about any of this at all. Or maybe they've just resigned themselves to just be like, you know what, I have to be myself, or I have to live my life, yeah, with these kids all the time. It is what it is. Maybe that's the parents' way of looking at it, but I don't know, but it's a lot of pressure to me. It's a lot of pressure. And no, I don't feel like I can be myself around kids. I feel like I have to be an example. Um, so who knows? That's a whole other conversation. That can be that's something else to unpack. But needless to say, I can relate to what she's saying here. Um, I have a couple more highlights here. So she has a chapter called Season 1, Episode 1. And she says, not having parents meant I never had any pressure to date with intention. And I never had to worry about the gender or personality or life goals of anyone I was sleeping with, because it wasn't like I was going to bring anyone home to meet the people in charge of my trust. So I'm not sure if Samantha was dating women before her parents passed. I don't know if she even ever had to broach that topic of her sexuality with her parents. Um, but nonetheless, she's expressing how there's some relief in that she gets to live her life the way she wants. Having to um she's not having to agonize over what the parents are going to think. The parents are not here. And again, that's something else that I can relate to. I had a much better relationship with my parents than she seems to have had, but um, being, like I said, in my early 40s now, and having friends who have their parents, or knowing people who are in their 60s and their parents are still alive, and sometimes you see how people are very they're having to think through all of their actions based on what their parents would think. They have to think through their career moves. They're still looking for approval. Um, and I just think I just observe it. I can't relate to it. And I just like, man, some people are finding it to be something where they still have to justify what they're doing. Um, but at the same time, when you have really good parents, I can see how it's such a wonderful thing to still have your parents up in age. For the lucky people who have really lovely parents, they appreciate that. So she goes into more of that in the book. She talks about being poor. She talks about um, you know, she says, because my people are poor people who were masters in the art of robbing Peter to pay Paul, I didn't learn about establishing credit until I was 34. And that's in less than 10 years. That was at this time when she wrote this book, she was 40, I think. Um, and so it was very recent for her learning how to establish credit. And she talks about all the different things that she has dealt with, and sleeping in her car and being evicted and all these different things. It's really, but she makes light of it. She makes light of it throughout. So it's really interesting. Um One thing I will say, and I'm wrapping up here in terms of my highlights. Uh One thing I will say throughout the book, I would wonder, she's a comedian. Not really. I mean, she doesn't do stand up, I don't think, but she's a humor writer, and she does a lot of exaggerations. There's a lot of hyperbole in her writing, and it's funny. It's funny. It makes the stories funny. Um it's a really a great tool that she uses. Um but there are times when I wonder. There are many, many, many times throughout the book where I'm not sure. Okay, are you tell? Is this hyperbole, or did this really happen, or did you really do that? Um, because there are some things that she does, or some stories that she shares that you stop and you say, wait a minute now. Look, I know you dropped out of college. I know that you had a rough upbringing. I know that you've kind of worked these different blue collar jobs, most of your life doing this and that. But you seem to be, based on your writing, you seem to be someone of some sort of intelligence. And you'll just see her, she'll talk about something that you're like, come on, girl, I know you didn't do that. Or you didn't say that, or whatever the case may be. Just sounds like something um kind of idiotic. I know you didn't do that. And in this one piece that I'll share right here, and this is my last highlight, I was reading this story she's telling, and I literally thought, now, girl, that is dumb. If this is true, if this is not hyperbole, and you really did this, that was dumb as hell. And then she addresses how dumb it was, because it was true. So evidently, she was contacted by a guy who asked her, did she have an agent? And after she published her first book, which she sort of did on her own. It wasn't self-published, but she didn't have anyone on her behalf looking at any of the paperwork or anything. She negotiated it herself and published her first book. So this agent reaches out to her, asks her, did she want an agent? And she was like, all right. He sent over some paperwork, and she says, then he sent me a contract I didn't read before signing. Now, again, I know you grew up poor. I know your parents didn't teach you things. I know you didn't have good examples of money and things, but we know you can read. Right? You're not illiterate. You seem to have some sense about yourself. Sure, you didn't read the contract? I'm like, that seems beyond unwise. And sure enough, the next paragraph she says, um, I say I'm dumb all the time, and people are quick to fight me when they assume it's just my inner saboteur jumping out. But here is a shining example of the ways in which my synapses sometimes do not connect. I thought I would sign with an agent on the off chance that if a new idea ever came to me, I'd have someone to call who would find someone else who might want to pay me for it. It never occurred to me not to take this next step without an idea because he wanted to make some money because this is his job, but I didn't have any ideas. So, yes, it's true. She actually signed the contract. And so there were definitely moments throughout the book where she would just do things like that. It's like, that's not that's not wise, Samantha. She had these moments. But that's it for my highlights. And as we wrap up here, when it comes to memoirs and essays and different things where people are talking about their lives, I like to think of, if I knew this person, how would they fit into my life? So here's the question: could this person be in your friend circle? Um, and my answer to that is I would love to sit down and hang out with Samantha Irby. I think she's a good time. She seems to be a good time, and she knows about so many different things. And again, she has such great stories. My thing is, I don't know that Samantha uh, would want to hang out. I don't know. She could be in the friend circle, but I don't know that I would ever see Samantha. Um, like I said earlier, she is definitely a bit of a homebody, and she has a lot of friends, and sometimes there's just this struggle of making time to see people, and then making excuses not to see them, and so on and so forth. So that would be my answer to that. So then she says, um, I say I'm dumb all the time, and people are quick to fight me when they assume it's just my inner saboteur jumping out. But here is a shining example of the ways in which my synapses sometimes do not connect. I thought I would sign with an agent on the off chance that if a new idea ever came to me, I'd have someone to call who would find someone else who might want to pay me for it. It never occurred to me not to take this next step without an idea because he wanted to make some money because this is his job, but I didn't have any ideas. So, yes, it's true. She actually signed the contract. And so there were definitely moments throughout the book where she would just do things like that. It's like, that's not that's not wise, Samantha. She had these moments. But that's it for my highlights. And as we wrap up here, when it comes to memoirs and essays and different things where people are talking about their lives, I like to think of, if I knew this person, how would they fit into my life? So here's the question: could this person be in your friend circle? Um, and my answer to that is I would love to sit down and hang out with Samantha Irby. I think she's a good time. She seems to be a good time, and she knows about so many different things. And again, she has such great stories. My thing is, I don't know that Samantha uh, would want to hang out. I don't know. She could be in the friend circle, but I don't know that I would ever see Samantha. Um, like I said earlier, she is definitely a bit of a homebody, and she has a lot of friends, and sometimes there's just this struggle of making time to see people, and then making excuses not to see them, and so on and so forth. So that would be my answer to that. So tell me, what are your thoughts? Did you read Wow, No, Thank You? What are your thoughts on Samantha's essays? Let me know below. And I just can't wait to hear it. Thank you for joining me for Summers at the Library. So tell me your thoughts. Did you read Wow, No, Thank You by Samantha Irby? Let me know below what your thoughts are. Did you like the book? I'm going to give the book 4 stars out of 5. Um, thought it was a good read, very entertaining. I laughed out loud on many of occasion, and I related to Samantha in quite a few ways. She's she's an interesting person. She's definitely interesting. She's all over the place. She has great writing style that I really enjoyed. So I gave it 4 out of 5. Tell me what you think. And thank you for joining me for Summers at the Library. Take care.